And last but not least, he's here on behalf of Youngo, the official youth constituency at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And he works with the Alliance for Future Generations Fiji, a growing youth network organizing events and projects with local communities to improve landscapes and education on climate across the country. Welcome, Kamal Kumar. She. Gender equity in action. And we'll just introduce our keynote listener. You all know him, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Alrighty, so should we kick off with our first youth speaker? Greta, go right ahead.
I'm very grateful for being here and for being invited here, and I want to thank the United Nations and the Secretary General for hosting this event and for inviting so many inspiring young activists. And yesterday, millions of people across the globe marched and demanded real climate action, especially young people. We showed that we are united and that we, young people, are unstoppable. And I don't want to take up more of your time because I've been invited to speak in the General Assembly on Monday, so I will give the others more time to speak now and just wish you a very good day today, and I know and hope that today will be successful.
Thank you, Greta. Also, generosity in action. So, with that, Bruno.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bruno Rodriguez. I'm 19 years old, and I am from Argentina. I'd like to thank the Secretary General for generating this historic event in order to include the voices of our generation in the process of building paths towards a habitable planet. The climate and ecological crisis is the political crisis of our time, it is the economic crisis of our time, and it is the cultural crisis of our time. The scientific community was very clear. We are facing an existential emergency, and our world leaders have the obligation to make radical change. But change rarely takes place from the top down. It happens when millions of people demand change. I speak on behalf of the organized Youth for Climate Students movement of Argentina. Our movement understands that the power will see nothing without struggle. And that is why we decided to fight in the streets alongside the working class people of our country and marginalized communities by organizing massive strikes in front of the National Congress in order to stop the criminal behavior of big contaminant corporations and to put an end to the indifference of politicians. The diverse experiences of other countries are something we all need to learn from. And there are different contexts as well as different demands. I come from a Latin American country. The story of our region is the story of 5 centuries of pillage. For us, the concepts of climate and environmental justice are a matter of human rights, social justice, and national sovereignty in relation to our natural resources. That is why we need to demand that the 100 companies responsible of 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions transition towards a sustainable path. And we can make this happen by standing together and saying enough is enough. We don't want fossil fuels anymore. Young climate activists all around the world are building a new collective consciousness. There are no frontiers to fight for structural change. Many times we hear that our generation is going to be the one in charge of dealing with the problems that current leaders have created. We will not wait passively to become that future. The time is now for us to be leaders, and that is why we are here, to lead. My message to the Secretary General is simple. Let's stop demanding world leaders to listen to science, and let's start demanding them to act on science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno. And with 1 second to spare. Now let's hear from Wanjuhi.
Thank you. I represent voices of millions of young people in Africa whose future remain uncertain due to the climate crisis. Your Excellency.
No accent.
Thank you. I was born and brought up in a village at the foot of Mount Kenya, a major water tower in my country. My community's livelihood is from farming, relying on the rivers that flow from this mountain. We had previously never experienced water or food shortage up until January 2018. We realized it was time to take action. In our response, we harnessed the tools that are at the core of young people's interactions, social media. With the hashtag #SaveOurForestKE, in partnership with some of the biggest activist groups in the country with over 100,000 followers, we started an online petition to save our forests. What started as a fight for our Kafaru forest was now a national conversation. These actions led to reforms at the Kenya Forest Service, a custodian of natural resources. In addition, a national ban on harvesting of forest products was enacted. The government of Kenya has since launched the Greening Kenya initiative in December 2018, aimed at achieving our desired 10% forest cover. To my fellow youth, it is evident that starting where we are and with what we have will cause a revolution. What we are asking for as young people. First, we appreciate that youth are now at the table where the discussions are being held. But our voices and our input must be allowed to influence these decisions. Second, that member states respect and support freedom of expression, more specifically, internet freedom for young people to organize and amplify their voices on matters that matter most to them, especially the climate crisis. Third, for those of us in Africa, adaptation and resilience has become our focus in our effort to survive the climate crisis. We are the lowest emitters but suffer the most. But this is not the time to shift blame. This is the time to work together. We, the over 625 million youth in Africa, therefore ask for support, especially technical, financial, and skills transfer of the youth in their action and innovations towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. As the late Professor Wangari Maathai taught us, I invite all of us to be that hummingbird that puts out the forest fire by fetching water with its small beak, as all the other animals, including the elephant, told her it was impossible. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanjuhi. And finally, Kamal.
Thank you, Excellency.
No.
The United Nations Secretary General.
I have to say that whenever the word excellency is pronounced about me in this UN headquarters, I ask for a fine of $1,000 to help solve our financial problems. But I recognize that this group is not able to pay, so I will not put the fine. But I ask you please to abolish the expression.
The Secretary General, fellow youth climate justice advocates, dear delegates, Bula, and good morning to you all. It gives me great pleasure to speak on behalf of Yango, the formal youth constituency to the UNFCCC, and part of the UN MGCY coordination team. We are a self-organized umbrella movement with millions of young people in its direct and indirect membership. Young people from different parts of the world are living in constant fear and climate anxiety, fearing their future, the uncertainty of a healthy life or a life for their children at all. These negotiations on climate change policy started in 1992, even before most of my generation was born, for over 25 years, and the emissions have only risen. The Paris Agreement is rooted in intergenerational equity, and today we call upon everyone, especially the duty bearers and policymakers, to respect these principles. Respect the rights of future generations. Respect the agency and institution of young people. Respect the fact that everyone, from a low-lying country like mine or a rich country like we are in, has a right to a habitable planet. I belong to the Pacific Islands, a region that has contributed least to the climate crisis, but is suffering the most impacts. Our houses are sinking. Our communities are vanishing. While many countries and polluters only care for their short-term economic growth, the Earth has fundamental planetary boundaries. For many here, this may be about 36 or 70 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. But where I come from, it is about our very way of life, what lives and what dies. With due respect, between the graded IPCC graphs and multiple scenarios, things are black and white for us. Loss and damage compensation and additional support for low-income countries are still not comprehensive. And let it be clear, we are not insurance policies. We are human beings. We are communities. Is it really too much? Is it really too much to ask you to stop wasting time and walk the talk? Are we really looking forward to a future of false hopes? We young people have the following ask. We demand urgent action to phase out fossil fuels. We ask countries with high historic carbon emissions and fossil fuel giants to stop hindering the walk towards the welfare of the planet for their short-term profits. Young people want to meaningfully engage with the existing movements and be supported, partner with them. It's been less than a year since the rulebook for Paris Agreement, the Katowice Climate Package, was adopted. We call upon you to engage young people in their design of NDCs, of adaptation plans, the policies which will live through. We also call upon you to urgently fulfill our commitments to the Green Climate Fund, to support Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, making sure every young person is educated about environment degradation, to enhance our commitments, and for some, to come back to the Paris Agreement, and others to not doubt the science. And while you do so, remember, we will hold you accountable. And if you do not, remember, we will mobilize to vote you out. From youngos all over the world, we are here in a rightful place to demand consequential climate action. While multilateralism is attacked every day, while climate denial becomes prevalent and environmental defenders are criminalized, we struggle to keep our hopes alive towards the UN and other political institutions. However, we are already demonstrating how much this planet means to us. We have posed schools, defied the odds, and risked arrest. We are working in our countries. We are leading movements, conducting research, and creating green jobs. Join us. I do not want our future generations to submerge with our sinking islands. We want to give them a chance to be born, witness the diverse beauty of this planet. I hope you want this too for your children and for children across the globe. Vinaka, thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. And now, I won't say Excellency, because I'm not sure if you'll waive the fine for me as well. But our distinguished keynote listener, we would so love to hear your response.
Well, if I am a listener, I probably would not be supposed to respond. But first of all, it's an enormous pleasure to be a keynote listener when we can listen to meaningful things like the ones we heard. And indeed, I've been more times keynote speaker than keynote listener, but that is one of the problems of world leaders, is that they talk too much and they listen too little. And it is listening that we learn, and is giving the possibility for all those that represent today's world to speak and to have their voices being part of decision-making processes that we can move forward. And I'm really very enthusiastic about the leadership and the dynamism of the youth movement for climate action today in the world. When I started 2 years and something ago, I must say I felt very, very discouraged in relation to the perspectives of climate action. We are already facing a climate emergency. we were seeing, I'm not going to enter into technical details about it, but we were seeing this multiplication of natural disasters becoming more and more intense, more and more dramatic, with worst consequences. We were seeing drought in Africa. And namely, in some circumstances, not only making communities unable to survive, but being a factor of conflict, like in the Sahel, where the lack of resources in water was making farmers and others fight each other, and because of that, facilitating the emergence of conflicts and even the spread of terrorism. We were seeing the glaciers melting, the ice caps disappearing, the corals bleaching, biodiversity being threatened, heat waves everywhere. There was always, in the last few years, since I started, clearly this perspective, there is a climate urgency, things are getting worse. The worst forecasts that were made are being proven wrong, not because they were too dramatic, but because they were not enough dramatic in relation to the reality. And at the same time, there was a sense of apathy. It was very difficult to put these things on the table, and it was very difficult to make decision makers assume the need to act. There was a kind of a laissez-faire in the world, and all of a sudden, I started to feel that there was momentum that was gaining, and this was largely due to the youth movement that started a fantastic, very dynamic impulse around the world, moving progressively with their families, their communities, their societies, and based on the societies moving and the voice of the societies being heard, starting to have an impact on the way businesses were acting, on the way cities were acting, on the way regions were acting. And finally, we are starting to see electorates being active on these and governments starting to respond. There is a change. We are not yet there. We are still losing the race. Climate change is still running faster than what we are. We still have subsidies to fossil fuels. We still have coal plants being built. We still have many things that are not happening and should happen, or things that go on happening and should not be happening anymore. But there is a change in momentum. I feel there is a change in momentum, and largely this change in momentum was due to your initiative and to the courage with which you have started this movement and make this movement from a small movement in front of a parliament to, I believe it was the Swedish parliament, some time ago, into millions around the world, saying clearly not only that they want change, not only that decision makers must change, but they want them to be accountable. And this question of accountability is essential. Obviously, there are different dimensions on these. There are dimensions related to grassroots movements that at the village level are able to themselves be leaders in climate action. And then, based on that, push their communities, push their societies, push their governments to act. There is the way to participate in an institutional way in the bodies that are discussing these things. You mentioned Katowice. I went to Katowice 3 times. You can't imagine how difficult it is to make things move when you have 193 countries and we have to have all the countries agreeing with the moves that are absolutely obvious that need to be done, but there is always someone with some doubts or some questions or whatever. So we really need a very strong impulse. And your impulse, the impulse of the young people organized to push for the institutional decision-making processes to move is essential. And then you have also this fundamental reflection about injustice. We do not live in a fair globalization. And the dramatic thing is, it's not the African continent or the small islands in the Pacific or the Caribbean that more contribute to climate change, but they are the main victims. It's not the poorest communities that more contribute to climate change, but they are the main victims. And indeed, there is a question of justice and a question of fairness in the way the global economy is organized, in the way power is distributed. And this is also related to climate change. So your reflection is also a very important reflection. We need to link climate change to a new model of development, a model with more justice among people and a fair relation between people and the planet. And when we look into today's world, I think there is something that is new. We have had conflicts among people for centuries or for millennia since the human race exists. But for the first time, there is a serious conflict between people and nature, between people and the planet. And this could be absolutely destructive for the future of our communities and for the future of our societies. And it's not only a question of glaciers or ice caps or corals, even if that is extremely important, and biodiversity is a vital question in today's world. But it is more and more about the suffering of people. And this will become worse and worse as time goes by. Lots of people are today dramatically dying and suffering because of the impacts of climate change. So we have no time to lose. It does make sense to go on subsidizing fossil fuels. Some people present the subsidies of fossil fuels as a benefit to the population. No, they are done with taxpayers' money, with our money. It doesn't make sense that our money is there to boost hurricanes, or to bleach corals, or to destroy communities, like the ones that were mentioned here in Africa. Let's make sure that taxpayers get their money back and there are no more subsidies to fossil fuels. When people talk, oh, put a tax on carbon, that means more costs for the economy. Not necessarily. You can put a tax on carbon and reduce taxes on people, namely on salaries. And with that you help solve the problems of unemployment, namely youth unemployment. So there is a win-win strategy that is possible if we combine at the same time climate action with a fair globalization, with the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, and our plans for a more fair and just world in which the resources can be better distributed and better used. And I believe that what the youth is doing today, what grassroots movements are doing today, is absolutely essential for this to happen. I encourage you to go on. Some people say, oh, it's very dangerous, very complicated, all these young people, be careful. No, I'm not careful at all. I encourage you to go on. I encourage you to keep your initiative, keep your mobilization, and more to hold my generation accountable. My generation has largely failed until now to preserve both justice in the world and to preserve the planet. I have granddaughters. I want my granddaughters to live in a livable planet. My generation has a huge responsibility. It is your generation that must make us be accountable to make sure that we don't betray the future of humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you to the Secretary General of the United Nations and our amazing panel, Greta, Bruno, Wanjuhi, and Kamal. It has been wonderful to hear from you. So, I think we have a little video transition, but while they're queuing that up, did the Secretary General of the United Nations just credit you all with the momentum that's happening in the climate action movement right now? Did that just happen? It sure did. You can cheer for that. And did he also do an amazing impression of a crotchety old person standing in your way? That I will carry in my heart forever. So, you are literally seeing history happen here at the United Nations, and this is what happens when we bring young people into this amazing building. So, more to come. You can always cheer for that. And now we're on to our next thing. You guys are really seeing behind the curtain here. Things are happening quickly. So, we've got a great start, and if you're ready for more, we've got 3 questions that they're going to throw up on their slides. Someone run over here and tell me what you want. This may in fact be because we are ahead of schedule, can you imagine? In this downtime, please tweet and post. All right, so we're saying goodbye. We'll just let you go. Please thank you again to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, and our panel, Greta, Bruno, Wanjuhi, and Kamal. This is like the Golden Globes.